Kids are just so aware.
Oh, I know. They're so aware.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, welcome. Good morning to our overview of Orton-Gillingham here at Prentice. I am Monica Matuzak. I teach 6th grade here at the Prentice School. I see some familiar faces here. I'm super excited to see 6th grade represented. We usually get a lot of lower elementary parents. This is my 7th year here at Prentice. I previously taught 5th grade here for 1 year and then went over to 6th and will never leave because I love 6th grade. So.
And I'm the whole bird queen. I teach 3rd grade, but I also teach 2nd grade too since we do level. I've been here for 9 years at Prentice. Taught 2nd and 3rd grade, never gone higher, but I know many of the families just because they all start with me 2nd and 3rd grade, so I'm excited to see many of you and welcome to our new families to Prentice as well.
So just to get an idea, can we go around the room and just see what grade you're representing? It's always just nice for us to get an idea. So if I just kind of point in the back, just let us know what grade your child or children are in. I'm going to start way back here. Hi. 6. See you. Yep. 3rd. 2nd. 3rd. Up here to you guys. 3rd. 4th. 6. Yeah. Hi. Oh, 7. 3rd.
2nd.
4th.
6.
3rd and 8th.
Okay, and for my 4 6th grade family, oh, sorry, did I miss one? Yeah. Sorry. Yep. 7. Okay, 4 6th grade families. I am so excited that you guys are here. We often don't get 6th grade represented, so thank you. I think it's super important, especially as your child is entering into middle school and to continue those strategies at home, post middle school, into high school, all of that. So I appreciate 6th and junior high today.
You guys ready to learn?
Yeah.
I know many of the
students.
2nd and 3rd graders, at least the ones I've talked to who told me that their parents are here, are excited because I told them now you guys will know they can't weasel their way out of like not doing their homework. And they are very excited that you guys will be seeing what they do every day, and maybe at home you can kind of prompt this. This will be a conversation starter for you guys at home to say, hey, I learned this, tell me about it. That's fun.
So we're going to walk you through kind of a simulation of what an Orton-Gillingham OG lesson would look like. It can look a little bit different across the grades, not so much the content of what they're learning, but just how the lesson is delivered. You know, we take into account attention spans, we take into account additional repeated lessons that need to happen. So it can kind of look different in each class. Sometimes rotations happen where students are pulled like in groups of 2. Sometimes it's whole group where it's 4 to 5 students. So it can look a little bit different in terms of how many students it's delivered to and what that looks like. And we break it up usually doing sort of the decoding reading on one day and the encoding and spelling on a second day, just to also help with that retention too. So we're not, pushing through lessons just constantly and they're not really mastering or retaining that. So we want to make sure that not only are we breaking up that lesson into those 2 parts, but then each day we're spiraling in previously learned concepts too and practice too as well.
What is structured literacy?
Okay, so structured literacy really combines 2 big areas. We're looking at language comprehension and we're looking at word recognition. This is Scarborough's reading rope, okay? A lot of this information that we utilize throughout our day, well, everything we utilize throughout our day is based on the science of reading, and this is a hallmark of the science of reading. This is how we view structured literacy. Right now, we're going to be focusing on an Orton-Gillingham on the word recognition side. Language comprehension side resides in Amplify. So that would be I was going to say 6th grade, but that would be our grade level curriculum that your child has in class to target comprehension. But today, we're going to focus on word recognition. We're going to walk through what phonological awareness looks like, what decoding looks like, and then what sight recognition looks like. When these work in tandem and they increasingly become automatic, and increasingly become strategic where that metacognition is built in and they're thinking about their own thinking, that builds a skilled reader. Okay, so when we think about ourselves when we're reading, the majority of these concepts are working in tandem and automatic, okay? If we have any deficits in those areas, obviously the skilled reader is gonna look a little bit different and we have to sort of target those individual ropes more intensively, but all of these combined make a skilled reader.
So Orton-Gillingham here at Prentice is a multi-sensory approach that uses auditory, visual, kinesthetic learning. So your kids are not just sitting at a desk writing everything. They're moving around, they're physically touching manipulatives. It's a systematic reading system, it's phonics-based. So everything we do is going to help meet their needs and their learning style. We know, like Ms. Matuzak said, our kids need to get up and take a break, or they need that movement. We're going to instill that within our phonics-based system here with Orton-Gillingham.
And Orton-Gillingham is prescriptive based. So what that means is that, we are acting as diagnosticians. We are constantly reassessing in the moment through our own assessments, and it's adapting to their needs. So it's not going to be a traditional linear trajectory where, okay, we finished that lesson, we're moving on to the next one. We might have one or two students in our small group where, I think we need a little bit more practice with either learning how to syllabicate words, learning the closed syllable word. So then we're able to go back and really remediate that and continue to work on that so that we are getting close to mastery so that they can apply that to higher level concepts. So it is a prescriptive way of teaching that it is adaptive. It's not something that we just check the box on and move to the next lesson.
All these guys got off here. So what does it look like at Prentice? It is sequential. There is 63 sequential sections into our Orton-Gillingham. Our ratio is we have no more than 5 students in a group. So your child could have anywhere, I think our lowest is 3 to 5. And that's 2nd through 6th grade. 8th grade, it's a little different. They do small groups. And we'll talk more about the 7th and 8th grades in just a second. They are reading, they're decoding, they are writing, they are manipulating words. They are doing it in isolation, and then they're going to do an application. So they learn it one way, and then they're going to apply it the next. And there's 7 syllable types. So we have closed syllable, which has to do with a lot of our short vowel sounds. Open syllable is when it's a longer vowel. We have vowel consonant E, so that's silent E that likes to get in our students' way when they just want to say it sound a certain way. R controlled, so A-R, E-R, L-E.
That's L-E, and then also we have,
I'm trying to think now. Closed, open. Oh, digraphs and
digraphs and
diphthongs. So those are vowel teams, E-E, O-O. Why doesn't it just go ooh instead of back? So those are 7 syllable types.
And at different schools too, those can be described in different ways. Sometimes schools use vowel teams. Sometimes we use digraphs because it also allows, especially for sort of that word study, what does the word part die mean and what does graph mean? So we're also really targeting those word study skills of, okay, so die means 2, we're working to 2, graph means the written portion, okay, so it's gonna be 2 letters coming together, 2 vowels coming together to make a sound. So we describe our syllable types that way. You'll notice that it says practicum at the top. The majority of us here that are solely teaching, the ones that are solely teaching OG and that are teaching that in their rotation, we are certified through the Dyslexia Training Institute. So we went through a very rigorous practicum, lasting between 1 to 2 years, depending on the coursework. But we work in tandem with them, and it is very intense in terms of they come on campus, they observe us in our lessons, they're providing instant feedback, we're adapting to that feedback, we're learning lesson planning with them, we're learning how to manage a group, how do we adapt to it. So it's a very incredible way to learn, and it kind of mimics almost like a master's program, if you will, in terms of the coursework that's involved and then the fieldwork that's involved.
Can I ask a really quick question? Are you guys going to be sharing the presentation at the end?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, we will share this with everyone.
So you guys ready to get started? I want to the lesson would look like. Okay, so in front of you, it's somewhere in your pocket, I apologize, there's a sheet that looks like this. Hopefully you guys saw this in your students' homework last night. All students were given sight word homework, primarily you've done at home. And so we want you guys to have this, I'm gonna tell kids, hey, I know it, so you keep them accountable. But this is our way of practicing those words that just don't follow a rule, just kind of have to know how to spell them. And so it's a lot of multi-sensory approach here.
And we call it the sight word study method too, because we want it to eventually be sight, so they know it by sight. And oftentimes too, we might see words that, oh, that actually fits a syllable type in OG. So it's sight word in the beginning until they learn that syllable type. So just to be clear of that too, if you notice eventually that, well, this was actually part of one of the syllable types that you taught, how come they were learning it in the sight word study method? Well, in the beginning, they're going to see a lot of these sight words throughout text that they are involved with. And so we want to continue to help them with that decoding and encoding of words that they're going to see often, high frequency words. And then they're going to learn them more intensively when they get through the syllable lesson.
I'm going to show you common words that our students spell wrong a lot of the times, but with this method, they're able to kind of pick it up. So, let's see the words.
Just click and flip. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. How many of your children, please be honest, spell this word wrong, like maybe S-E-D? It's very common, right? They're spelling it phonetically. S-E-D. They forget that A and the I, right? So what the steps are for the sight word study method is they're going to read the word, and everything is done in pairs of two. If you do it once, you're not going to remember it. If you do it more than one time, you are. So what they'll do is they'll read the word said. They will tap each letter 2 times, just with their finger. S-A-I-D, said. It's really important that they blend it and underline it so they know it's a word. Yes, we're saying each letter, but we have to blend the word. So they'll do it twice. Then they'll grab a pencil. I always do the back of the pencil because as a resource, as almost like they're writing, they'll trace it. S-A-I-D, said. S-A-I-D, said. They have to be saying it out loud or else it's not going to work. Like their muscle memory is not going to work. Then they have 2 options. I give it to at least the 2nd and 3rd graders. They can flip the card over and practice that muscle memory, writing it on the back with their fingers, S-A-I-D, said, twice. Or if they're still not feeling comfortable, just moving it up and just writing it underneath, S-A-I-D, said.
And so we're using those multisensory methods, right? So the kinesthetic, where they're actually physically doing it, the sight, and the hearing themselves say it. Because research shows that when you're using all of those systems in tandem, it's really registering in the brain and you're able to store it better.
The next step is arm tapping. So I always say, use your strong muscles. You're using your muscle memory, so you're going to arm tap. If they are right-handed, it'll be different if they're left-handed. If they're right-handed, they're going to go down, S-A-I-D, set. If they are left-handed, they're going to tap top, bottom to top. So if you have any left-handed students, make sure they're going S-A-I-D, set.
And the way to remember it is that they're going to be blending it the way that we read it, right? So if the S is this way, going up, then they're going to be blending it that way, okay? But if they have to flip and spell it this way, okay, S-A-I-D, then they're going to be blending it down. So it's just, you want to make sure that they're blending it in the direction that you would read. Think of it that way.
So left hand goes up, right hand is go down.
And with the arm tapping too, I will preface, that is often the step that kids will try to go really fast through. So we want to make sure that they're really doing it intentionally, okay? They're seeing the arm tap, they're hearing themselves say it, and they're blending it. Oftentimes when they get used to it, you'll see S-A-A-D slip, and it's not processing in their mind, okay? They're just doing it to get it over with, okay? So we want to make sure that they're being intentional with that.
If you see it at home, have them stop, slow it down. I think like Mrs. Matusek said, it just needs to be that slower pace so that they're actually hearing them say the sounds. The final step is with their pencil. they'll flip over the card and they're actually gonna write it 2 times now. So they should be going S-A-I-D, and again, blending it instead, drawing that line so they know that's a whole word. And then doing it one more time, S-A-I-D. We also don't want them to write super big and crazy because we want them to actually get that motion of the letters as they're saying it.
And for some groups too, I know my group will do this as well. They might not write it on the back of the card, they might write it on a whiteboard. So they might prefer doing it on a whiteboard, they might prefer doing it on a separate piece of paper. As long as they're practicing with that encoding spelling is fine. They don't necessarily have to do it on the back of the card. You know, some students with dysgraphia, it can be harder to write in a smaller surface with tiny lines. So just being cognizant of what works best for your child.
So that's the sight word study method. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
So some of the sight words do follow, you mentioned follow that syllable, I forget the terminology.
Yes,
the
syllable type.
Yeah.
Some of them don't. And do you just present that as you just have to learn it?
So that's a great question. So in some cases, yes, they're gonna memorize that because it is gonna be a high frequency word. As they're getting into more junior high, we're building in what we call the SWI method. That's the structured word inquiry method. And that is based on morphology and the history behind words. So they're looking at Greek and Latin words and roots. So once we get to that, we might be studying, well, why is that word spelled that way? And so we might be getting into the history of it. Well, if you look back in like ancient times, it started out like this with the Greeks. And then as it traveled, now it's here. So it's giving a little bit of meaning behind it because spelling is based on meaning. Really look at that. So as they have more of that historical piece to it, it also allows them to remember that spelling more. So that's kind of how it gets into more of the advanced work.
But for the younger ones,
Yep.
is it purely a?
Until
Until we get to that point where they are able to understand and grasp that, like the SWI would, then yes.
And now some of these words, like we look at said, okay, and we might think, okay, well that doesn't follow a syllable type. Well, the way that we would teach this is the schwa. Okay, a schwa is the spelling type that we're going to teach. And schwa is a vowel sound that does not make it sound. It is the most common sound in the English language. It makes a lazy or it can sometimes make it. Okay, it can also make, like in this case, we have ed, okay, it's not making the AI sound, which would be a, if that was a vowel diagram. So when we're teaching this one, from a sight word into more of our OG progression, this is going to be pulled out to learn in the schwa method, okay? And they're marking it in schwa. We'll talk a little bit about marking in a little bit, but that's also helping too when they're using the marking for schwa to know, okay, well, this is following that schwa. That's another way to think about it too.
And is that taught at like the second grade level already?
That's taught through progression, anytime you're in the OG progression, and that's one of the most popular lessons that we continue to review in every grade.
So it will be taught in the early grades, yes. I always use the example word of like bacon. We don't say bacon. They think it's so funny when I say, oh, I want to eat some bacon. We don't say bacon, we say bacon. It's that lazy sound. So even second, third, fourth grade, your child will be exposed to it. Like Monica said, we're constantly reviewing schwa because it's just a hard concept to understand. Why is it lazy? Why can't I just say bacon instead of bacon?
And it's hard to spell. And that's where that SWI comes in. Like, okay, well, why do we think it has a schwa? Why do we hear that lazy it, or sometimes, that lazy sound? Well, if you look back into some of like the historical piece of it, you can see where when it was originally spelled, it doesn't feel comfortable saying. So then they had to adjust over time. So it really builds into that more historical piece. But in the beginning, we're looking at schwa. That's just what they're thinking of. So when we're having them do those tapping and spelling words, we're gonna ask them, do you hear schwa? Okay, so we know that it's not gonna be the vowel then that you would normally hear. It's gonna be a different one. So that kind of builds their awareness too.
Because that's a hard one for the littler ones.
It is.
As they're trying to.
It's hard for the older ones too. It's hard for the older ones too. Yep.
Again, like I said, I do a lot of being silly, bacon, dragon, but it's really emphasizing like because of that sound, like we don't normally say it. So it is hard. Again, every grade, every teacher is repeating schwa every year. Just it's a concept that is really hard for just in general our students, even for us as adults, just trying to grasp why is it making that making sound. Very good question.
I have a new to the school.
Yes.
So do they kind of start, do you meet them where they're at, or do you start like at kind of a grade level?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So it really depends. We look at a few factors. So we're gonna look at if they've had experience with OG. If they've had experience, like if they have a current OG tutor or they remember where they were in the progression, we're gonna reassess them just to see if that would be a good starting point. If they're new to the school, and it's kind of it depends on really the grade. So like for example, in 6th grade, if they're new to the school and they've never had OG, because we want them to really experience all 7 syllable types, and that can be upwards of like 60 to 80 lessons, and we're not gonna get through all of those, then what we might do is in more of the basic concepts, we'll do more of a review of those first 2 syllable types, and then we'll spend more time in the later syllable types. So it really depends on where your child is. It is more prescriptive and adaptive, like what you're saying, we're gonna see where they are. But yeah, it's not gonna be like, okay, you're brand new, we're just gonna start at the very beginning, and we're gonna just hope for the best and we get through all of them. We're gonna, as we go, see, okay, they're picking up on closed syllable pretty quickly. We're not gonna do the rest of the lessons, we're gonna move on to open. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So to piggyback off of that,
Yeah.
so I have we have a 2nd grader. I know there's a bunch of 7th grade parents or 2nd grade parents in here. At public school, we went through sight words. It's just pure memorization. You drill.
Yep.
So I know that we came home with sight words last night. If she came home with 3, she knows those sight words. So like, how are you guys incorporating like past knowledge and current knowledge
Of sight words.
of sight words? And then to piggyback off of that, Ms. Bernstein, you had written said twice on these cards. Is that how the homework for the sight words should be done?
Correct.
Going through this and then writing it on the card?
Correct. Either on the card or like I said, they can do it on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, whatever they prefer, but yes.
Okay, so even if they've mastered those words.
So if they've mastered those words, obviously that's something that you're gonna be in communication with a teacher, but every Friday they're getting assessed. Okay, so then when they get assessed on Friday, we're gonna see, great, so they've either mastered those words, they have it. And it's not gonna be like, let's say for example, they get 5 words and they didn't master them on Friday, and then maybe the next week they didn't master them. We're still gonna be incorporating more because we don't wanna be stuck on those words, and we're gonna figure out why. What is it about those words that you're getting stuck on? Is there maybe a syllable type that we can kind of jump in and show them? But in terms of just mastering, we'll assess every Friday and see. And then a couple of times a month, depending on how quickly they're getting through their sight word list, we might assess them then on the next full sight word for that level, which is really between, it's about like 50 to 100 words, depending on what that level is. And then we're gonna make note of which ones are missing. So we're constantly assessing the next level too. So when they finish this level, we know what they're gonna be working on next.
And when they graduate to the next level, do you guys go back and review the
Yes,
previous
so that's
lessons?
incorporated through, other like review activities, if they're pulled out for rotations, or if they have some independent work time, then that might be something that they're working on.
It's a constant review, but also too, I wanna let parents know, especially the younger grades, if your child is able to read the word, it might not necessarily mean that they're able to encode it or spell it. So your child is getting the word, yes, they're probably able to read it. I know my OG group, if I would my OG parents, your children probably can read the word, but it's the spelling that we're working on and that muscle memory. So again, communicate with your teacher. I know who her teacher is, so I can talk to her. But it's a lot of it's that spelling part of it. Yes, they could say said, yes, they could say because, but we're working on that spelling. If they are coming to they know how to read and spell, just let your OG teacher know and we can do it. But it's a constant review.
And what they can do at home sometimes is different than what we see in a classroom, right? Because they know they're getting an assessment on Friday. We know when we hear the word assessment or test, what that brings to the table and the anxiety that can come with. So they might be doing, really well with that at home. And then when we see them on a Friday, maybe we're assessing and they miss it and they know that they know it, that's great communication with the parents too. That it's not so much they don't know it, there's another factor that's just impacting that too.
Our kids started in 2nd grade. How about the words that they learned in 1st grade here that she didn't get to learn?
So then we start with our assessments at the beginning of like pre-primer indulge list for sight words, and then we're assessing all the way up until we see where they meet that instructional level where they need to review those words. So we start at the very beginning assessing. So if she's some of those 1st grade words that she's missing, she'll get those to her sight word list.
I saw a hand. Doctor, did you have a question?
I did. So yeah, kind of, but you might have already answered it, but like, with sight words, I get anxious because we're in 6th grade, right? And we've been through all the sight words with all the other in public school. And so to come home last night with like the word little, I know it's really hard, right? It's like, oh, we're back here, like, and then I'm also like, but she knows it, she like went through, she could read it, no problem. But yeah, and what I'm worried about is that in this context, she doesn't get it. So, because a single word given, she can read it, no
Yes.
problem, but the words on the page, blend all together.
Yeah, and so that comes into the passage reading step 2 of our OG lesson, where they're looking at the syllable type words and the sight words in context. So they're getting that exposure to that as well, and we'll talk about the steps with that too. But yes, that's a great question. And also, when we're getting into the older grades too, we have to also think about preparation for high school, right? And what that's gonna look like. And how much we need to rely on assistive technology so that we're able to be successful in a more traditional setting. So that's kind of a combination too. We're using more of that co-writer. We're using the snap and read to help us too. Because yes, it can feel very defeating sometimes when your older student comes home and you're seeing those words like, gosh, we learned this a long time ago. And our students often struggle with memory. So that can be hard too. So we're doing as best as we can to really continue to remediate and work on those skills, but we have to also keep their priority in mind too, that when they get in high school, what is that gonna look like? Well, they're probably gonna use a lot of their assistive technology tools.
One more question.
Yeah.
Those passages that come with the words, are they supposed to be, will those vary student to student based on where they're at?
So it really depends on if your group is working on the same lesson, or if you have a couple students working on one type and another working on another, then those passages will be linked to that. So for example, if I'm teaching the introduction to closed syllable, then the passage reading they're getting are decodable words that match the closed syllable in addition to sight words, because sight words in every passage. So they'll practice that with the lesson. Good questions.
So our next drill that you're probably doing is called the phonemic awareness drill. It's the understanding that words are made of phonemes. Phonemes are sounds. So if you ever hear your child say, oh, I'm learning about different phonemes, that's the sounds. Graphemes are the letters. They're just fancy words for letters and sounds. So your child will be using blocks like this or different kind of manipulatives. This is where that multi-sensory approach comes in. And they are going to be saying the sounds, those phonemes that they hear. So we're not trying to spell the word. They're just trying to say the sound. So a lot of our students don't like, they just want to spell the word as is. So for example, if, I'm going to go basic to more complex. So if the word was hat, they might go at. Okay, hat. Those are 3 phonemes because those are different sounds I hear. At. Every phoneme, every sound gets a different color. If I had the word mom, for example, it's the same color for the same phoneme I hear. We want them to be able to identify the same sounds, those same phonemes that they're hearing. We're not having them spell the word, and I'll show you where that would not be how it sounds, but we want them to be able, again, to isolate the sounds, those phonemes that they hear.
And it's hard too when you're thinking of words that they already know, because they want to focus on how it's spelled. And we really want to isolate the sound. So oftentimes too, we will do nonsense words so that we can get them to focus on those phonemes. Because, when we think about dyslexia and language-based deficits, it's phonological, okay? So they're really having to manipulate sounds in their brain. So what we want to do is see that out. So we're putting out the blocks, we're having to pick out those phonemes so that we can see how they're processing that and what are they missing, what are they getting stuck on. The other thing that I often get from parents is, well, why don't you just say sounds? Why do you have to teach them phonemes? Well, everything's about word study. Okay, so we look at the word phoneme. What do you think of? Phone. Oh, so then we might do this movement, especially with our younger students too, that you're hearing something. It's the sound, and we're giving them more of that word study too. Now you've learned a new root. Now you've learned that grapheme. Why don't you just say letter? Well, grapheme has to do with write. Graph is writing. So again, you're building that knowledge to word study.
And those are the hand motions we use. Phoneme, we go like this, like you're on a phone. Every kid knows a cell phone, what it looks like. And then grapheme, we pretend like we're writing a letter.
It's now the cool phones like this.
Oh, how fun is that? I do like this. Kids all
The kids are probably like, what are you doing?
Second and third graders all know this. Another word, potentially one more word, the word wish. We know wish is W-I-S-H, right? But when we say the sounds, it's sh. But they're going to say, but Miss Bernstein, I know it has 4 letters. There should be an SH here. We're going to say, you're right. However, we're just doing the phonemes, those sounds. sh. So that SH is going to be one block because it makes one phoneme, one sound. So that's where we're talking about, where that complex, that breaking down of, yes, I understand, but we are really just focusing on that sound, and that's gonna help with that application part of it. Yes.
So going back to the same sounds, get the same color blocks.
Yes.
So for example, your example was hat and there were 3 different sounds. Mom had 2 same sounds, so the 2 M's were
Yes,
both
same
red.
sound.
So if you had a word like kick, so the K and the CK would be the same color block.
Correct, because it's still the same sound.
So the same time, and then that's where you go into more discussion. Okay, if we were to be writing this on paper, what would be the graphemes? Okay, K, I, is it a CK or K? And that's part of a lesson that we do teach them, when you use K and when you use CK. But that's a good point for us to be like, hey, you're right, they make the same sounds. Are they the same actual letters, the graphemes? So we do break it down.
And the reason too why we want to focus solely on phonemes right now is because we need to make sure that they are hearing correctly what we're saying, because also that's going to help with the spelling too. If we're doing wish and they hear whis, okay, then we know that they're missing that sound, and we're asking them and we're having them to look at our lips too and hearing. So I might say, okay, listen to the in phoneme, shh. Okay, what does your mouth do when you do that? Okay, what does your mouth do when you do it's different. It's a different movement too. So we're breaking that in there as well. And then we're doing things like substitution, deletion. Do you want to show that?
So if I had the word,
Start with cat.
cat, act, cat, I might say change the k to a b. So the student's gonna think in their head to a b. Oh, that word is b, act, that. So you're asking them to really stop, think, if I'm going from k to a b, what's my new word that I'm making? And that could be at the beginning of a word, it could even be an ending of a word. So if the word was ring, change the ing to an ink, would be link, rink. Something like that. So you're changing it up.
So you're manipulating those sounds in their mind too. It's also great for working memory. Okay, so for students that really struggle with working memory too, this might be hard for them, and we're trying to figure out what is it right now that's really causing that difficulty. And by having them in the moment really run through, okay, I want you to, if I'm doing wish, I want you to remove, well, they're gonna go ish. Okay, great. Now I want you to put on t at the beginning. Okay, tish. Okay, now I want, and you're sometimes doing it that fast because you want to see if they're able to manipulate those sounds, depending on what they can handle. For some students who might have to go a little bit slower, but you really want to see if they're able to manipulate those sounds, because based on those phonemes, that's going to come into play for decoding and then for encoding the spelling.
So those small groups, the 3 to 5 are
Yep.
similar? I'm assuming those are broken into groups that are students that are similar.
Correct. So, yeah, so we talked about that too. So it really depends on, we're gonna look at all those factors. If they've had OG experience, all of our assessments that we look at too, are they able to recognize the syllable types both in decoding and encoding? We do some OG assessments too. And if we've noticed that they're able to meet that, great, then we're gonna find out where they fall in the progression, and then we're gonna look at the rest of the students and build our groups based on that.
So they'll change sometimes.
They could change
They
throughout
could
the
change, we
year.
try not to, just to keep with consistency and routine, but as, again, we're adaptive, and as kids progress faster, or they need more practice, then yes, the group might change.
And if it does, the teachers will notify if there is any changes.
They'll notify you?
They'll notify
Yes.
if there's any
If
changes.
there's any
they'll
changes,
notify
you will
you.
get notified for that.
Again, my thing I want you guys to know too is every drill that we do, every concept that we're teaching is a building block. So we start with the sight words, we're starting with these blending drills. It's gonna eventually lead up to those reading comprehension passages. Are they able to apply it, what they've learned, now application. So I want you guys to know you'll see it's gonna be a progression, a building block for them to get to that final step of that reading fluency.
Some of our kids are in speech therapy for sound concerns. How does that impact this?
So we have a great speech and language team. I know for myself, if I have a student who does need to be pulled for speech, we actually ask the speech teachers to come and observe during our OG lessons, give us some tools that they're using during their speech time to incorporate into an OG group so that we can tell. We also don't want the kids to feel like, hey, I'm gonna get something wrong because I can't say it correctly. So we do that grace of like, okay, if it's a shh and we're not getting there yet, there's that articulation, we're modifying it and just kind of understanding it.
Okay.
A lot of our speech team does come and show us like using our mouth more, and we use it for all of our students, not just for our students who are in speech, but they're really good at coming, observing, letting us know how can we incorporate some of those speech tools within OG, because it is hard with those sounds and those the way you hear.
And vice versa, we're noticing too that during the phonological awareness drill or anything else that we're maybe noticing a speech deficit there, we'll communicate with them, this is what I'm noticing, to also utilize their background so they can tell us more, but also they may have suggestions in addition to that, or they may be able to pinpoint, where that is falling in that type of testing deficits.
We have 2 more drills, and they are the visual and auditory drills. So your child's teacher will have cards like this, maybe some vowels, maybe some digraphs, blends, and they're just gonna show them and say, okay, say with me, SW swap, and maybe a keyword. So we would say SW swap, like in swim. So they're visually seeing the graphemes, they're saying it out loud. We go CH, like in chair, A, apple, they do that. So they're visually seeing it. We will then take it away and we use whiteboards. I know Mrs. Matuzak and I use these kind of boards where they can write on, which they love. It's a different kind of multi-sensory tool. We'll say the grapheme, but we'll say the phoneme. So if I say, write all the ways you know that go, they're gonna go on their board and go, they're gonna write it and show us. That's kind of our cue of, are they able to hear those phonemes? Are they able to identify what the grapheme is?
And the reason why we say all the ways is because once they get into more of those complex syllable types, so for example, vowel digraphs, those are the vowel teams. Okay, so let's talk about like AY makes A, AI makes A. So now we're gonna utilize that and during the visual drill, and rather just showing the A card or telling them A, we're gonna say, what are all of the graphemes that you recognize for the phoneme A? And at that point, we want them then now writing all the vowel diagrams that they know, so it's not just gonna be A. As they do get, higher into or more into the progression, there's a lot of memory that has to be remembered from the vowel diagrams, from the diphthongs and all of that. So it's super important too that we're constantly going back and reviewing and then we're assisting them with that. Like, hey, we're missing one more vowel diagram there. I know you know it. I'm gonna give you a keyword so that can help their memory as well, because it's a lot to hold on to when they get to the end.
So for example, like CH, we know CH goes ch, but CH is not the only graphemes that go ch. We also have, TCH. So if a student doesn't remember that TCH, like Monica said, we're constantly reviewing. Or we might give a keyword. Hey, think of ch, like in the word patch. Sometimes that gets in their head, oh, it comes at the end of the word. What sound that makes the ch, what letters at the end go like this? So that's where that TCH. So you might see TCH, CH, the k sound, like we talked about. There's C, there's K, there's CK, S, or PH, F, double F. They all make the f sound. So like Monica said, that muscle memory, but we're always reviewing, even at the younger levels. And you will be surprised at how much they are remembering those ways.
So just to kind of ask you guys, can you sort of figure out why we would use TCH versus CH? And I'll give you 2 words to think about. Catch and lunch.
Right person on it.
Think about those in your mind and see if you can figure out what are differences in the words.
And I'll write them down so you guys can see too. Say catch and lunch.
You guys signed up to be like students, guys, okay? I'm going to put you guys on the spot, okay? Because also you can feel like what it is to be a student, right? Oh, I remember learning that.
And if our students are like this, they're like, oh, I'm not sure. We will write it down and we'll have them look. What is?
But we ask, like, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you notice?
Shout it out.
Shout it out. What do you notice?
Is it vowel and consonant?
Vowel, syllable.
Oh, we hear vowel, consonant. Okay, tell me more.
One, the TCH comes after a vowel and the consonant is a CH. It's a good guess.
Oh my gosh, if I had like a gift card, I'd be like, you get a gift card. So we notice up here, in lunch, right before the ch, we see a consonant N. In catch, right before the ch, we see a vowel. Okay, think about stitch, pitch, okay? Munch, I'm doing UN right now, I don't know why. Now, I challenge you, my students always do. Okay, but I found one that doesn't follow it. And then we get into like the history of the word. Well, let's go back and look at where that word came from and why that is. Because oftentimes you'll hear people say, oh, English is just so complicated and you just have to know that it's complicated. It's complex. I say it's not complicated, it's complex. And there's a reason behind it. And when you get more into like the linguistics and Greek and Latin roots and the history of words, you will see that there is meaning behind every way that we read something. It could be that it came from a Germanic language. It could be for that. And as we get into the higher grades, we delve into that. But this is just kind of an example of how we're helping our students to think about in the moment when they're spelling. Okay, so I'm giving you the word catch. Do you hear a consonant before ch? Okay, so how are you gonna spell it?
And we might color code it too. Okay, highlight the way in lunch that makes it the CH, so they can highlight the N. Highlight the way that makes it the TCH and A. So it's a lot of like color coding, multi-sensory approaches. Especially in the younger grades, especially if your child is just starting the progression, we want them to visually see the difference there.
And then for catch, here's another like pop quiz from what we talked about earlier. Do we hear catch? Like, do we say catch? Or do we say catch? Do we remember what that was called? It's a vowel that, what was it?
Schwa.
It's a schwa. Schwa's even hard to say. It's a schwa. And then we talk about that. It's a schwa. Okay?
So how about beach?
Beach. Beach we have, yeah. So beach in that case, that's a vowel digraph, right? So the EA is coming together in that one. And then we might even go back and look, that's a great word, you're right, it doesn't follow that. Let's figure out why. Let's go back and look a little bit at the history of the word. Because yes, you're always gonna find words that don't necessarily follow that because the English language is borrowed from many, many languages. And oftentimes too, when it doesn't maybe follow explicitly, it's probably because it's a borrowed word or there's some history behind that.
So all of these rules then are really working memory, right?
Working memory, long-term memory, it's all of it in tandem, all your executive function skills.
So like the long vowel sounds, the AI, the AY, the A-E.
Yep.
That's all, I mean, you would put them down like this, but then it would all be just like how you guys teach that particular method.
Correct. And then again, looking at it in context too, because spelling is all based on meaning too. So oftentimes too, when we recognize words, whether it's decoding or spelling, it's because it's meaningful to us and we have a connection to it, okay? So if we have a student that's like, well, I just know how to spell beach all the time. Do you go to the beach all the time? Do you see the word out there all the time? Have you seen it in print? Do you like to read about the beach? So that's already stored in there. They have that knowledge for that because it's also background knowledge too.
Good question. Thank you for participating too.
Yes, we don't have a quiet audience. That's awesome.
Talk about the visual entry drill.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna get into the blending or syllable card drill, okay? And I say or because if you are still working, we're still working on one syllable words. So let's take, for example, closed syllable, one syllable words, so like cat, okay? Not multi-syllables, like fantastic would be more than one syllable, but if I'm still working on one syllable words, then after I do these drills, I'm gonna jump into the blending drill, okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that. And so we are presenting to you a lesson on the closed syllable progression. So that's around the beginning of the OG progression. So if I was doing the blending drill with my students, okay? So you can't see that, so that's not helpful. Okay, so we have tip, okay? So I'm gonna tell the students, okay, tip. So they're gonna go, tip, and they're gonna pull it down, okay? Because I also want them to see how many phonemes and graphemes that are there, okay? So again, I might even do it another time. Great, let's do it again. Tip, and notice I'm blending across with my fingertip, okay? If I was to do another one. Okay, so I'm gonna say rock. Repeat it back to me, they'll say rock, and then they'll go rock. Shouldn't say rock. Rock. And you notice I caught myself there because I don't want to tell my students rock, because then they're hearing an at the end of it, okay? So if I'm noticing that too, I'm gonna stop them in the moment and I'm gonna say, look at me, okay? Give me the phoneme for rock. And then it's almost just like a quick sound, because I wanna make sure I'm not adding any additional sounds onto that, because then that's gonna be stored and then they might incorporate that into their spelling or decoding. So that's part of it too.
And this is, if you can tell, we're going from the blocks, which is with no letters, not seeing it, and that's just the phoneme, to now with the graphemes, those letters. So it's connecting. So they're hearing the phonemes, now they're hearing the phonemes and the letter and connecting them together. So again, those building block pieces.
So if you're, let's say for example, instead of just doing one syllable closed drill, let's say that our student has already learned 2 or more syllables, okay? So in lieu of the blending drill, unless I need to bring it back in. But in lieu of that, I'm now switching over to the syllable card drill. So now what I want to do is I want them to visualize it with syllables versus phonemes, okay? Because when you're getting into multisyllabic words, yes, sometimes you're going to need to rely on all those individual phonemes, but in terms of an efficiency standpoint and storing it, we want them storing it as syllables, okay? So in this case, I'm going to have them go fantastic. They'll repeat it fantastic, and then they're going to go fantastic, fantastic, okay? Same thing if I was doing, this is a good one. Rabbit, they would repeat rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. And then they might say, but I don't really pronounce it rabbit. But then we talk about where we split syllables, and if there's a double letter, we're splitting it. We talk about that. And that might have been a previous lesson that we learned, so then that's building in their previous knowledge that they learned. So even though we're doing these drills, as they're sharing information, we're adapting to that. So they're telling me in the moment what I need to focus on. So if I'm noticing that they're questioning this, oh, remember when we learned about when there's a double letter and where we split it? And it's, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that now. Okay. I should have those two drills.
So you split it there versus the RA
Correct.
split.
Because my word is
That double consonant, and when we split syllables, there are a couple of ways you can split syllables depending on the type. But for this word, if you see a double consonant, any multi-syllable word, you're going to divide it between the two consonants.
And I'm going to show you
Like little, right? Little gets
Yep.
split.
Little does too.
Little
But like rabbit is like more rabbit, right?
It is.
But
And I'm going to show you why.
Yeah.
When we have a syllable that ends in a vowel, does anybody know what that's called? What kind of syllable that is? Say it louder.
You guys say it. You know
Open syllable, okay? So we go from a short vowel sound now to a long vowel sound, ray, okay? So then it would be ravent, which is not how we pronounce it. The B is there to help us remember that it is a short vowel sound. That's what it's doing there. It wants us to make sure that we remember that this is a short, that's how we mark a short vowel sound. Okay.
But when you do the phonemes, you're not saying rab.
No, but again, we don't want them thinking about the letters when we're doing phonemes. We just want them thinking about the sounds.
So when you're teaching new words, are you teaching the phonemes first and then the diagram?
Correct. We want to see if they can manipulate those sounds first. Because when you're looking at the letters too, you're doing more than just phonemes. You're using your sight too, you're focusing on sight, you're focusing on the decoding or spelling aspect. When we're doing phonemes, we solely want them focusing on building their phonological skills.
You're doing all of these, right? Because they need to know the sounds, they need to know the syllables.
Yes.
Because reading, they need to put it all together.
Correct.
So you're reinforcing all of these in different lessons.
So think about it in isolation, and it's coming together in a passage, okay? Think about it that way. And so what we're walking you through is actually each part of our lesson plan that we have right in front of us. That's each part of it. So as you can tell too, timing really depends. Like how quickly you get through a lesson. We don't want to think of it quickly. We want to have that in the back of our mind because we want to make sure that we're exposing them to as many syllables as we can. But if they're guiding us through our instruction, which is what our students should be doing, they should be part of the process and helping us decide what we're teaching, then we might have to spend more time. And you know what? Now we're going to spend more time on the blending drill because I noticed that it's kind of hard for you to really focus on this one phoneme. So we might need to then spend the rest of our time working on that. So it really just depends.
And where do they get, my daughter knows with her sounds, from what I can tell, but writing will get some letters backwards. Yep. Where would that be enforced?
So I want you guys to think this is like a 2-day lesson. So what we're doing, like all of our drills, if we're teaching a concept, that's day 1. The second day, and that's in isolation. The second day is going to be more the application and the writing. So are they able to understand it when it comes to apply it in a reading passage? And then we're also going to give them time to actually write words and sentences that connect to that role. So they're going to get it in that lesson. It just might be over a couple of days. If that makes sense. So that encoding, that writing does happen in our lessons. It's towards the end once we can do isolation, application, and then the encoding part.
And encoding is the hardest part, right? Because you're taking everything you've learned now And now you're having to utilize all those functions to get it done on paper.
When you test on the Fridays, how is that tested? Are they writing it? Are you
They're writing it.
doing the color blocks? How does
So it depends really on per teacher what they want. So with the sight word assessment, we just want them to know solely by sight. Are they able to spell it by sight? So
hold it up?
they won't even hold it up. We'll just say, okay, said, repeat it back, said, write down said. And as they're doing it, we want to reinforce that they're using the strategies to manipulate those sounds. So we might have them finger tap, especially if they're like, okay, like fantastic, for example. I was on multisyllabic. That's not a sight word. I don't know why I just chose that word, but let's just pretend that was a sight word. Okay? I would tell them, okay, don't forget, I want you pulling out each of those phonemes that you hear or each of the syllables that you hear as they're spelling. Because we want to make sure that they're still using those strategies on their own, not just when we're showing them. And we want to make sure that wherever they go, especially even in Amplified, if they're working on writing something or decoding something, we might prompt them, okay, don't forget, you're struggling on that word. I need you to use your strategies for OG. So we're not showing it to them. It's solely for spelling on writing.
So the sight words should be words that you know by sight.
Correct.
Right? But you guys are actually having them spell those words out, not just recognizing them by sight.
Well, because we want to make sure that they're still remembering their strategies if they do get stuck. Okay. Because again, our students are not going to, some of them might, depending on their memory, but the majority of our students are not going to remember and memorize all of the sight words that we've exposed them to. We're going to continue to reinforce that. Even if they get in the next grade, we're going to retest them all over again. We're going to see. And they might even say sometimes like, oh, I had that sight word in this grade. That's cool. So you're going to remember it. We're going to practice it all over again so that we're constantly going back. Yep.
Sorry, just to clarify, is you're just having them write the word, or are you also going to have them write it in a sentence? So
For the sight words, just the word. Okay. Just the word.
There will be sentence writing in a lesson later. We'll get to that. Good question. So this is where that application part comes in. You've done the phonemes, you've done it by the letter cards. Now you're going to have, and I did pull an example one here for you. Now you're going to have them read them in isolation, isolated words and the sentences. And again, this is based off of a multisyllabic closed syllable lesson. So you're going to have them, there's an example here, but on yours, the words are slept, cabin, topic, vanish, catnip. So again, you taught your lesson, you reviewed it. We're going to practice reading these. Can they remember the rules, and we're going to divide it? Cabin. Okay, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to divide cab, be the first syllable, in be the second syllable. Can they divide topic? Okay, that's the isolation part. Then you're going to apply it to the reading. We slept in the cabin. They will read the sentence. They can even highlight it. A lot of the times I have my students highlight the word that was in isolation right here and say, hey, what pattern, what do you notice about the word? These are all words that they are going to connect to for that spelling or that concept.
And as we're doing this too, depending on, because every child is different in how they learn, I might have one child who's reading this very quickly, and I have another one that needs a little bit more time. So I'll tell that child, okay, great. You've just learned how to scoop syllables. We taught that in our previous lesson. I want you to scoop those syllables while I'm having this person read. So that way too, we're keeping in mind too that just the different consistency and time for each child too. Who needs a little bit more, who needs a little bit less, so that it can be prescriptive.
They'll go from this, and then they'll go to the reading passage. So you have that tennis at sunset. So again, isolation, words, to more the application. It's going to have sight words in it, maybe some that they recognize and don't recognize, but that's teachable moments for us to be like, hey, what is this word? It's a sight word. Okay, next time we see it, we're going to remember it. Do you see any rules that we've learned? At least with the younger kids, and I think the older kids, we do a lot of highlighting. Can you highlight the rule? Can you highlight all the vowels? Can you highlight TCH versus CH in the word? Because if they can read it, now we need the application. Can they figure out what they just read?
And with this one too, so it's not just a one-stop, you read it and you're done. So we're going to start with reading it to them. They're going to follow along. Then they're going to practice reading it to themselves. Then they're going to practice reading it out loud to us. Okay, and if we need to do another reading, we will do that as well. If we notice that they're getting stuck on words, we're prompting them in the moment with whatever syllable type that is or whatever sight word. Okay, so like if they get stuck on a sight word that I know that they've learned, I might prompt them, remember we learned that sight word. And I'm also keeping in the back of my head, we need to go back and add that to our deck to practice. If they finished reading it, okay, I'm gonna go back and have them highlight the syllable type that we're practicing in this. So in this one, it's gonna be multi-syllable, closed syllable words, so they're gonna go through and highlight them. Then we're gonna check as a group, what did we highlight, what did we miss? We're gonna reread those words. And then depending on what I might notice, I might notice that one of my students is getting stuck on TCH, one of my students is getting stuck on schwa. Any one of those factors can come into play with this too, and that will drive the lesson as well. Like, okay, let's go back and review this. And I might keep that in the back of my head, like, we need to go back to that previous lesson and I need to do a review activity with them, whether that be on their own or whether that be with them.
The passages are not this long for different groups, depending on where they're reading. I just wanted to tell you that, like, if you have lower readers, they're not going to have this long of a passage. They might have a small paragraph, and then you're really dissecting what's going on in that paragraph. So
we do half of it one day,
depending.
So yeah.
So if you're reading the passage to them and then they're getting to read it themselves too, one of the things that I see is that she'll guess because now she knows the topic. And now she knows what's coming. So then even though she's not really reading, she'll guess it wrong.
And then when she reads it out loud, we'll hear that.
Yeah.
We'll hear that. And also, recognition is good too, right? Because whenever we're reading, we're bringing our background knowledge. So if, for example, like your child plays tennis and this story is about tennis, they might recognize a lot of those words because they're exposed to it, and that's great. They might know that by sight already because that's exposure to it. Okay, comprehension is dependent upon background knowledge. That's why oftentimes too, I always say to parents, whenever you have standardized assessments done or formal assessments and whatever reading comprehension passage they're doing, it would really be interesting to see in that assessment what that passage was about. If they were being tested on a passage about soccer and they never heard about soccer, they never played it, they're not going to have much background knowledge to bring to that either. So that's just a good thing to keep in the back of your mind too, that when we're looking at those scores too on assessments, you really have to think about what was the topic, And if the topic was about dancing and my daughter's really into dancing and ballet and all of that, well then they probably might do a little bit better. They might not be able to decode every word, but they have that sight recognition from just the exposure that they're going to do better on it. So it's always good to keep that in the back of your mind about what the content is too that you're being tested on. Yeah.
I have an older child as well here, so I'm assuming once they kind of, I won't say master, but kind of beyond the more basic side, or you're gonna use this for fluency?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And junior high looks a little bit different in that program. In junior high, we're really focusing on those executive function skills and getting them prepared for high school and everything that they've learned here. How do we really summarize that and send them off with their little individual imaginary toolbox? But at the same time, they're getting rotations of OG and they're getting rotations of SWI, that structured word inquiry, based on their needs. So if they need still more of that remediation with OG, then they'll focus more on that. If they're ready for that next step, then they'll do SWI.
Is the OG teacher teaching the SWI or the ELA?
Whoever's been trained in OG, they'll do the OG. Whoever's been trained in SWI, they'll do SWI.
So they may not necessarily get OG.
Correct. Depending on, it really depends on your child and what that program is. I don't know the junior high program exactly as much as I know 6th grade, but I know that just from talking with them too. And both of the ELA teachers in that, one of them has been trained in OG, both of them have been trained in SWI.
So ask them.
Yeah. It's a great question. Yeah.
Reach out to them and they can tell you, especially the 7th and 8th graders, which kind of grouping they're in.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm so sorry you may have covered this.
No, that's
What is SWI again?
Structured word inquiry. Okay, that is not part of OG. That is something that we are piloting in junior high, and I am also piloting in 6th grade. And that is the etymology or study of words. You're looking at the history of words. You're getting into Latin, Greek roots, all of that.
So is that something that's typically covered in middle school, but that's something that you're doing that's different, or?
Do you mean middle school in general, like?
I said older grades, right?
The older grades. So we just started training in it this year.
Okay.
And it's something that
It's not for elementary.
we're piloting for junior high and 6th grade, yes.
And is that something that's typically covered in middle schools, or it's something that you're doing?
It should be, but it's not.
Yeah.
So is it like the next step to OG?
You can kind of think about it as the next step, but it's much more built into word study and building word knowledge. So when you think about, let's think about like high school and kids take like Latin, or they're getting more into those Greek and Latin words, and where does that come from? History and science, okay? So it's really just like the next step to help more too with the contextual part of it. So when they're delving into more of these history and science textbooks and topics, they're able to really recognize those root words, what suffixes and prefixes mean, which we also study in OG. We study root words and prefixes and suffixes. You want to think about SWI as that on steroids. Then you're delving more into like the history behind it. You know, why is a word spelled that way? Can we think of other words in that category? And as we delve more into SWI and as it becomes more of our program in the future, we'll definitely do workshops on that. But right now we're just in the preliminary stages. That's it. Okay. So encoding, which is another word for spelling, okay? So when we're doing encoding, and the start of this part in our lesson,
This is not writing, so encoding, we talk about
encoding
writing.
spelling, it's the writing part, okay? Did we skip over the new lesson? Do you want to do the new lesson? Did we show the skipping? Let's do that one, let's go back a little bit. You want to just pause this? Yeah. We're gonna pause on this one, and we're gonna go over, okay, so we just went through the part of the lesson where we did the blending and the syllable card drill, we did words in isolation, we did the passage, okay? I do want to show you, because you have it in your packet, steps for scooping and dotting, okay? This, I mean, a fancier word is syllabication. You're breaking words into syllables, okay? So this only comes after our students have had practice with reading and decoding words with multiple syllables. So it'll start in the closed syllable progression at the beginning. So we're gonna practice reinforcing, decoding them. And now we're going to practice how do we break apart the syllables and mark them, okay? So,
And again, it's very visual, very systematic. Everything we do, every class that we teach has like steps like this, so that the kids understand it visually, and then they can know the steps.
okay. So the scooping and dotting, that's what we call it, just sort of basically with our kids, just scooping and dotting, it's something that they recognize. You know, it is syllabication. We're breaking words into syllables and we're marking them. So we can also see how we pronounce them, okay? We think about this as phonetic spelling. So when you look at a phonetic dictionary, how it's spelled. So if we were to look at our pronunciation, the word fantastic, for whatever reason, this is just the word of the day that's in my brain right now.
Kids love this word. They really like this word.
Okay, so we're following the steps here. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna place a dot underneath the vowels. And they are doing this alongside us. Okay, so I'm doing it, watch me, now you're gonna be doing that. Okay, then I'm gonna ask them, what is the pattern here? Okay, do I see a vowel, consonant, vowel? Do I see a vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel? Okay, this is gonna help me with marking them, okay? So in this case, I'm going to then scoop, okay? Actually, I have to mark vowels first. So I'm gonna ask myself, when I break this up into fan, task, dick, this vowel here, do I hear a short or a long sound? Okay, so short is gonna be your ah, long would be your a. So I hear an ah. I mark a short sound with a little u above it. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one. Task, ah. Okay, I'm hearing that short sound again. It, short. Okay, so I'm noticing too what type of vowel I have and what type of syllable. Okay, and then I'm gonna scoop. Fan, task, dick, fantastic. And then now I'm gonna say, okay, this one has a short vowel sound. This one ends in a consonant. This is a closed syllable. So underneath it, I'm gonna mark it as closed with a C. Okay, and then now I'm gonna say it, fantastic. Okay. As they practice with us in a guided approach, eventually they're going to do it independently. We're gonna look at it. So I might give them a list of words. And then I'm gonna say, great, I want you to go to your desk, take your steps, and you're going to scoop and dot these words, okay? If we had an open syllable one, so I'll show you, for example, robot, okay? And I'm dotting, okay? Oops. and then I hear O. I hear a long one, that one, O. So I'm gonna mark it long, okay? And over here I hear ah, I hear a short one, and I'm gonna mark that short. And when I scoop it, I'm gonna mark this one O for open. I'm gonna mark this one C for closed, okay? Each syllable type that they learn is gonna be marked accordingly. So if they're learning vowel consonant E and there's a vowel consonant E syllable, they'll mark it BCE. If there's a vowel digraph, they'll mark it BD. So they're gonna learn all of those markings too and practice that in execution.
So you didn't do the pattern, you didn't do the
So then, yes. So then, yes, thank you for reminding me. Okay, so let's go back to fantastic.
And you can, at the beginning, we do kind of have them label as a vowel, consonant, and then eventually we want them to take that away so they can more identify it without labeling. But
Yes.
we do say, okay, I can do C, B, C, C, B for that visual part. They, instead of just them knowing, okay, it's gonna be here.
So then yes, we have a C, we have a B, we have a C, C here, so consonant, consonant. I have B again, I have a C, C, and then I have a vowel consonant,
We
okay?
usually do this right at the beginning of the new introduction. We'll have them label it, pull it away at the end.
Eventually we take that away and we just do this part of it. So then I know, okay, so vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. I know that I'm going to be splitting it here, okay? And again, they'll learn these patterns and where to split them, right? And again, when I say split it, I mean the scooping. I think we'll do it that way, okay? Yes, that's how that's incorporated in.
Yeah. Nobody started at middle school, second grade, this is something that's practicing as well.
So as I mentioned, when they're doing their OG and junior high, it's more of a rotation. So wherever he is at with the progression, they will practice syllable scooping too. It just might be in a shorter time frame.
Questions about this?
Is there a rule that you have to do two consonants? Like the last one was vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. Why would it be vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant? You understand what I'm saying? So you got C, B,
A
C.
lot of vowel consonants.
Right, so you got the
I think
three, why would you
C
split
should
it?
have gone
Yeah, why would you split it in
between the two.
C's? Why would you do the two C's together instead of split the C's?
Okay, so that's a great question. Anybody want to try to answer that?
The vowel, open versus close.
Open versus closed. So if I split it at the T and I have fant, do you pronounce it fantastic?
Ah, cool, awesome.
Okay,
It's a great question.
it's a great question.
So now it's a practical way of saying, now you get into saying the word
Yes.
Do and
before you split it.
yes, and you can understand too why it's so hard for our students.
There's a lot of rules going on.
A lot of rules.
For one
Okay.
word, I mean.
A lot of rules.
Wow.
Okay, there's a lot of rules. And also too, not only are there a lot of rules, but when you bring in all those executive function skills that come with it.
There you go.
What are they bringing to the day? Do they have a stressful day? Okay, are they really excited about something happening after school? I mean, all of those factors come into
Are they
play too.
hungry, depending on
I'm
the
wondering
hungry.
why you let's go you or something. There's a lot going on here right now in the first hour of school. I'm
But
like,
I have
holy cow.
to say, this concept and this activity is by far a lot of students' favorite thing to do. I get asked so many times, can we just do skipping and dotting? I really want to do skipping and dotting. And you'd be like amazed by how fast they pick it up, and they're able to just grasp it. So it looks really complicated, but again, once your child starts learning it, just ask them, hey, what did you learn? My group is going to be starting this in a couple of weeks. Ask your child, ask your son. He already did this during summer school, but this is by far the student's favorite thing to learn is skipping and dotting because it really is like mind blowing. Like, oh my gosh, there's 2 syllable words. This is where I'm going to split it up.
Hey, mine did it during summer school too.
Great.
That's what-
Okay, I
that's
mean,
what
yes.
That's where I was like,
Yes.
wow.
So for the multisyllabic words, more than just like robot, but for words that have like 3, 4, 5 syllables in them, will the scooping and dotting help them remember the initial syllable sound?
It'll help them remember the rule type. Or syllable type, I should say. Which is yes, the sound. But really we're gonna focus on that syllable type. What syllable type do you recognize here? Great. What vowel sound does it make in that syllable type?
So like for example, a word like hippopotamus, I'll get potamus or pomus, right? The hip part gets left off, but if you break it down by syllables, she's able to get hip, ho, what, hip, yeah, exactly.
You said yeah, I heard a schwa in there. Yeah.
So if you break it down by the scooping and dotting, you're really breaking it down in hip.
You are, and you're doing everything that
really
you're
hard
doing right now
You
is
can challenge
exactly, yeah, everything that you're doing right now is exactly what we want our students doing in the lesson too. We wanna see, are they, organically it happens, we wanna see the tapping. We wanna see on paper what it looks like. We also want to see if they're marking it, are they able to recognize the syllable type? All of that plays into decoding and encoding. All of that is helping the whole process. So yes, by marking it too, it's helping with the spelling, but it's also helping them in context too when they're reading. Okay, so I recognize that, okay, this is a closed syllable, this is a vowel consonant E. All of that is being reinforced.
Good word, good word.
Good word choice. Okay. Encoding. You want to talk about encoding?
So this is kind of where you guys are asking, where do we do the writing? How do we apply what we just did at the beginning to that part of it?
Okay. So we do our sound tapping first. This is kind of, I would say, similar to phonemic awareness without the blocks. Okay, so we're going to take those words that we just learned. So let's think about these words, okay, that are on your sheet. We're not having them pull this out in front of them, but I might now use these words like, okay, so we're gonna do our sound tapping. You're gonna repeat after me, and then you're going to tap with your fingers. How many syllables? In this case, I'm doing syllables. If I didn't have a multi-syllable, then I'm gonna do phonemes, okay? How many syllables? Okay, you're gonna tell me, okay? So in this case, and we like to do it like this. I know my class says that. Yes, your class says it. Okay. So we're having them pound them out. And the reason why I hear some people say, well, why don't you do the clapping? Because if you think about the clapping and where it hits, sometimes are we saying them at it, in the middle of it? How do we do it? So this is really great and it also tells them how many. So if I have, for example, the word cabin, okay, I'm gonna have them repeat it and they're gonna go cabin, 2. Okay, and then they're gonna go to the next one. And I don't have it in front of them, they're just looking at me and we're doing it together. And then eventually I'm gonna say, okay, you do it for me, I'm gonna give you the word, okay? And then again, it's reinforcing what they should be doing as they're spelling, okay? Then after the sound tapping, now we're gonna do our writing, okay? So they'll have a sheet in front of them, they'll have a spot for words, they'll have a spot for sentences. So think about they're doing this without the paper, okay? So I'm gonna have this in front of me, they're gonna have their line paper in front of them, and I'm gonna say, okay, repeat after me. In this case, it says slept. Slept, they're gonna repeat it, and they're gonna go, and they're going to, as they're writing, I want to hear that they're doing that. I want to hear it, whether it's a whisper, you know, if I'm working one-on-one, I'm gonna hear it out loud, but I want to make sure that they're pulling out all those individual sounds as they're spelling. If they miss a letter in it, I might just say, I need you to tap out those sounds for me again, okay? So I'm not necessarily I'm not gonna mark a run saying you got that wrong. I'm gonna give them a chance I want you to go back now and try again, okay? And then I might make a little note on their encoding sheet that they needed prompting to go back, so that just reminds me that I wanna review that word, okay? We'll do the same thing with sentences. Depending on how long the sentences are, I might chunk it. I might say, I'm gonna give you the first part of the sentence. I need you to repeat after me. They're gonna repeat it. I have them repeat it twice. They are not allowed to pick up their pencils until they repeat it twice and visualize it in their head. And then they start writing, and I wanna hear that tapping, okay? That's for this. That's for the spelling part of it. Yes?
When it comes to homework and the kids writing at home or doing their sight words, if they do the same and make a mistake or flip a letter, do you want us to also?
Absolutely, reinforce that, okay? And you might just say, you know, hey, we missed that one, I'm gonna give it to you, I want you to respell it this way. Just have them respell it, absolutely.
Letter reversals too, B and D. We do a trick like this. Bad dog, we say. Bad dog, that can help them. Just say, hey, check your B and D, check your bad dog, and that will help them with the letter reversal.
My daughter likes B has a belly, D has a diaper, so I don't want to, there's so many different acronyms you can use. But that just helps them too, to like also physically see it too, okay? Do it like this. That is totally common to do letter reversals. And we're just gonna reinforce that as we go, right? So if I notice that they reverse their S, I'm gonna go, oh, I see that the S is backwards, can you fix that for me? That's it.
Jen, these are just tools that we use. You saw letter cards, flashcards, we do magnet tiles where it's like where they're bringing down letters to spell, document counter has blocks. So we're using a lot of tools for that multi-sensory approach. And then we just, as we get towards our end of our presentation, these are some books that Monica and I have read, we really enjoy. It really talks about just dyslexia and our students' brains, overcoming dyslexia, Cruising the Squid, the science behind reading brain, and David and Goliath.
And all of these authors, have researched and spent years in the field of language and language deficits. So they really do a great job too of breaking down, like, how did we learn how to read? How did we evolve over time? Where are these deficits occurring and why? How do we remediate them? They really break it down into all of their books. And there's a few by Marianne Wolf that you can find online. That was her first one that she wrote, but she has some more recent ones too as well. But this will be in this presentation that we send out, so you can see those. But those are good ones to check out too if you ever want to see something about that. But that is the end of our presentation. Any questions?
I was gonna say, I know you went over time a little bit, and I think
We had some good discussion.